Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Pepin, NHL Talk. I'm Thomas Pepin, and let's talk about the NHL. So, after a long series, I didn't anticipate it to be this long 33 parts. We are finally done. Well, assuming there's no additional streams of the series after today, which I don't anticipate there will be. I think this should be the end of the series. And in today's stream, I'm going to be commenting on and discussing the full roster I've created, which you would have seen already in previous streams, but we'll talk about it in greater depth. We're going to forecast production of the team or estimate, however you want to put it. And we're going to compare that to current teams in the NHL. And then finally, I'm going to summarize the full series. So, what I think I'll do in that case is go through each of the streams and just talk about the main points. Maybe. I don't know. Anyways, we'll play it by ear, see how things go. So first we'll just pull up the roster here. So just a moment. I don't think you'll be able to see it if I put it like that. Okay, this should be good. See, I'm not sure how much space I think that's probably about right. Okay, so to summarize the roster, does it allow me to move anything? No. So these are, estimated lines. I don't know if it's going to turn out, or if it would turn out being this. I don't know what the best combination of players would be on the lines, but this is just an approximation considering their strengths and such. So our first choice in this series was Sebastian Aho. Again, remember, so the criteria we had were couldn't be longer than a 5-year contract with preference of 3 years or less. Couldn't choose like the best players like a Draisaitl, McDavid, and all that. Considering the first point. Couldn't choose any entry level players on entry level contracts. Couldn't choose any guys that have performed dramatically better than their salary. So somebody that's making league minimum and is producing way more, or somebody like Tage Thompson. I think he's at like 1.4 million or 1.6 or something like that, and then he's like one of the best scorers in the league. All that kind of stuff I eliminated from my options. Tried to choose people somewhere towards the top of their the tiers that I established. So basically, highest reasonable production given their salary, and otherwise tried to filter using some advanced analytics. So I used wins above replacement and expected goal differential or something like that. I can't remember the exact title of the stat, but so tried to get it where both are positive, so they're better than the average player, and where they are consistently a positive player. So they, it's like plus minus. Basically, they're on the ice for more goals than they are against. So yeah, so anyways, so those were the different criteria, and I started with Aho. I think my second choice was Reinhardt, if I'm not mistaken, Reinhardt or Pedersen, and then if it wasn't one, it's the other. We did, I think Larkin was the next one after that. DeBrincat was probably the next one there. Niederreiter, Toffoli, and Perron. I forget which one was first out of those, but they all came kind of together. And then Kubalik kind of stood out. He's of the remaining ones that I chose. And then basically final line, Parise, Donato, Perry, and Sprong are all kind of interchangeable, but with preference probably to the way that it's organized now. Then on defense, these might not be the pairings as well. In this case, I kind of did it just based on salary. So we have Vince Dunn, TJ Brody, Matt Grzelcyk, Brandon Montour, Gustafson. Giordano should be ahead of Clifton. I don't know why that's organized in that way. Maybe it changed it on me. But anyways, Clifton and then Mark Giordano. And then last, in net, we went with Varlamov as our primary goalie. I wouldn't use starter because they're kind of all going to be active goalies. That's part of the strategy. Reimer was a second choice. Reimer, Halak. I think Halak actually has better stats, but Reimer has maybe more consistent historic stats. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but that's what I recall. And so anyways, so all of those three goalies are supposed to kind of, if one's injured, the next one comes up, or if one's not playing good, the next one comes up, and so on, and you keep rotating until somebody's producing, and then in theory you should have better producing, I guess, goaltending, or better team goaltending, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. So, and I don't mean it, just to be clear, I don't mean that you just one loss and they're out, or two losses, they're out. You're going to give goalies a reasonable amount of time to play, but you equally don't want to give them too much. So if they're on their game and they lost, it's, keep them in net. If they're off their game and won, maybe keep them in net. If they're off their game and lost, then that's where maybe one or two of those, and then you're switching. But anyways, so all those players combined, we have a total cap hit of $81.5 million approximately, cap space of $950,000 approximately. So I think it looks like a good team. That's kind of what we're going to have a look at here and figure out. So that's the roster. Now, I guess one other thing I just wanted to comment about. Just give me a sec. So the last thing I should say just on the roster, we are prioritizing, I guess, simultaneously two things. So offensive production is our priority in combination with differential. So we want players on the high end of scoring who, considering that high scoring, are appropriately well-rounded. So you could argue that it's actually the reverse. We want well-rounded players with good scoring. Depends on how you look at it, but that's kind of the goal. So we want this baseline of defensive skill. So essentially where nobody's going to be bad defensively, and then the difference between their defensive capabilities and their offensive production is maximized as much as possible, and that defensive production has to be at or better than break even. So in theory, it's supposed to be a team that can defend but can also score, and the combination should be a better, more well-rounded team than all the teams that are out there right now. And the other thing I guess two other things I'll comment on. Defensemen are more or less break even is the goal. So they just can't be a liability. They need to be, their production needs to be so basically they get scored on less than they score across the board, and the amount that they score is not important because that's all allocated to the forwards. So as you can see on the roster, we've got Dylan Larkin as our third center, but the reason why we can do that is because look at our defense: 4 million, 5 million, 3.7, 3.5 million, like really inexpensive D. And so that's why we can spend more on forwards. And as long as the defense can hold water, because of more scoring up front, the differential should be greater. And then last, in net, like I said, the goalies rotate, which I did already kind of discuss. All right, so now we're going to move to forecasting or estimating production for the team, and then we'll compare it to current rosters or like the best in the league. So just a sec here. Where is it? Perfect roster forecast. Okay. So I'll need to make this smaller. You won't be able to see it as well. And it's for as I do calculations, because I'm going to have to do those first. Okay, so we've got the stats from these players over the past 4 seasons, which doesn't result in full seasons. Or, sorry, because of COVID, 2 of those are not full seasons. Wait. Oh, yeah, and then this season. So it's 2 COVID seasons this season. Those are all not full seasons, and then last season was a full season. And so altogether, it's approximately 3 seasons worth of data, which is what I wanted. Going further back to 5 years to get to estimate production would be, I think, too far back. I think 3 years is a decent time frame to consider or to use for estimating production out of players. So the other thing is what I could, in theory, do is I could do a weighted average of each season. I could do the well, essentially like a compound growth rate where if this first season grew in, so their production grew by 5% from season 1 to season 2, and then grew by 3% season 2 to season 3, then you could, estimate that it's 3% plus 5%, and then the average between the two is what they're going to do the next year. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of different ways. To be honest, I don't know that players are so predictable that any of those are really going to be all that accurate. So really, I think just use the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, and what we'll do is we'll take their average and then just extrapolate. So if their goals per game average through that time frame is X amount, multiply that by 82 games, that's their expected performance. So that's what we'll do. Now, the there's a couple of things that are difficult about estimating. So goals, it's probably not going to be perfectly accurate because actually, and that's a good thing to maybe take a look at that I didn't look at before. So what I was going to say is because we have such so we have more players on the high end, or more high-end players in our forwards, where, like I said, Larkin is our third-line center. That means, in all likelihood, his ice time would be less than normal. But I don't know for sure. I'll have to see what the total ice time is and see if that would be the case or not. So what their average ice time totaled would be compared to what a full forward roster would actually play. So we'll see that. Likewise for defense. Another problem that we have is predicting goals against. That's super difficult because it's goaltending, it's team defense. We don't know how these players play together. I'm going to see if there's a way to do it through those advanced analytics I was using. It just might not be possible, so we might only be able to predict offensive performance. But anyways, we're going to try everything, see what we can do, and then go from there. So just on the subject of ice time, that's something I should see. So there are 180 minutes of ice time for forwards, because there's 3 on the ice at any given time. So it's 60 minutes per player is 180. So that should be the total. Now we'll add all these guys together. Does this? No, it won't. So I'll just do this manually. 19.3 plus 19 plus 17.6 plus 19.3 plus 19.5 plus 16.6 plus 20 0.25 plus 15.25 plus 14.75 plus 15.75 plus 13.25 plus 12.25 equals. So yeah, as we can see here, the ice time is over by 22.8 minutes. Which means that we're going to have to shed some ice time off of some players, and then maybe also their expected performance. 22.8, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. How would we do that? 4, 8, 12. Let's just do a estimate. To one. What are the lines again? One, 2, 1, 4, 4. Wait. 2, 4, 4, 4. It's 23. That's pretty much right on. That's kind of funny. How much was it? 22 point. Actually, we'll just pretend that that's right. So, okay, let's do this. 19.3, 19.17.6. oops. .3, 19.5, 16.6, 20.25, 15.25, 14.75, 13.25, 12.25. Okay. And then that's how many minutes will adjust. How can I do this here? So that should be good. Equals that minus minus that. Oops. There we go. Equals that divided by that. And then we want that as a percentage. Okay, so just so you know what I did basically, so first I subtracted the number of, so I just estimated how many minutes I would subtract from all the players in order to get to the total number of minutes that are played in a game for forwards. And I did that just with arbitrary numbers. So any first line or second line player, I subtracted their minutes by 1. Third line guys, except for the centerman Larkin, I subtracted by 2 minutes. And then the fourth line, I subtracted 4 minutes from each of them. And then so that gets their adjusted time on ice. and then that adjusted time on ice is the factor I'm going to use to adjust performance. So their expected goals are going to be, so as an example for Aho, it's going to be 94.82% of what he's actually expected to do, because he's going to play that amount less of ice time. Whether or not that's going to produce accurate results, I don't know. But for one, as always, this is done on the spot. Second, good enough is good enough. So that's what I'm going to do here. Now, for we want okay, so we need to do the same thing for defense. So that is 19.75, 21, 18.3, 20.3, is that right? 18.6 and 21.75. And so for defensemen, it is 60 times 2, because there's 2 defensemen on ice at all times, in theory. So that's 120, which is pretty much dead on. That's not bad. It's as if I planned this, which I didn't, but it looks like it. So we will give Grizzlick an extra 20 seconds of ice time. And we'll just say zeros across the board. Equals that minus that. Sum doesn't really matter. Sum is correct. Equals that divided by that. They're all going to be exact. So that is good. Now we're going to get some adjusted stats here. If I'll need them all, I don't know, but I doubt it, but that's fine. Oh, yeah. Okay, so where's their games? So that is their actual so equals goals divided by games times 82 times the adjusted percentage. So that should be correct. So we've got goals divided by games, so that's goals per game times 82 games, and then times their adjusted percentage of ice time. So that should be correct. We will do this all to no decimal points. Then this one is assists per games times 82 times their adjusted percentage. And that equals that plus that. Get the total there. Okay, so that should be about right. So what was the other thing that, because we had, because I have to, well, I'm supposed to factor in the depth players, but because they're not going to be all healthy for a full season. How do I adjust for that? Again, let's just keep it simple. What's the point in going too crazy with this? All right, so let's just bring this down. Oh. Jeez. Already this looks like they're a massive powerhouse team for scoring. Like, I don't know if it's going to be accurate, but it doesn't seem like all that far-fetched. So let's do equals that plus that. So 340 goals for in a season seems high. I don't know what the norm is. We'll have a look after. Then the next thing we're gonna do is goaltenders. Give me a couple moments here. You want bear with me. This should only be a couple moments to do. We have... Oh, I need that first. Actually, I think I can share this. We need... Oh, I see him right there. We have Reimer. We have Halak. Give me a brief moment again. Okay. I think I'm gonna have to do the same thing as yesterday. Or wait, Wait. No, I don't think I will. Because they don't play the full games or the full number of games, or they wouldn't even conceivably do it, so I don't really need that. So how can I decide here? So first instinct is to do an adjusted amount based on who's better in net, essentially, so by save percentage. So equals that minus that divided by that. What? No, never mind. Equals that divided by that percent. Equals that divided by that. Equals that divided by that. Okay, still doesn't seem quite right. Because what this would indicate is that I basically split the games 3 ways, but that doesn't seem like what I want. And man, Varlamov and Reimer have all the ice time, so it's not just save percentage too, because they've had that save percentage over a longer period of time. Let's do this. 7, 5, 5, 5. 4, 7, 3, 5.5. 4, 7, 3, 5.5. And then 7, 1, 8, 7. 7, 1, 8, 7. Times divided by that. That's probably a lot more accurate. Okay. Okay, and then now I think I know how I'm going to do this. Equals that divided by that equals that divided by that equals that divided by that. Oh, we want equals 82 times that and this should be equal to 82. Super. Okay, so equals that times that plus that times that plus that times that. Cool, so I think that all makes sense now. So what I did was, let's adjust this. Oh, whoops. Okay, so what I did was I took the maximum time on ice. We took the save percentage as a percentage of the greatest save percentage on the team, which in this case was the same person. Multiply that by their ice time as a percentage of the largest ice time, and then that gives you an adjustment percentage. So in the case of Varlamov, because he's our best goalie, he remains our best goalie, and then that will determine how many games they play, and then so you do that for each of the goalies, and then we get a total percentage, and then you take their adjusted percentage divided by the total percentage to get their adjustment percentage, which is over here, take that, multiply it by 82 games, and then you get the number of games they play. So Varlamov 32, Reimer 30, Halak 20 approximately. And then you use the ratios, so their adjustment percentage times their average save percentage, and then you get the expected overall save percentage, which should be 912. And what we saw before from other calculations was league average is 913, I think. So we essentially have league average goaltending, but it's probably going to be better than that in reality. But anyways, because especially since Reimer's save percentage, for example, would be negatively impacted from playing on San Jose as a bad team. Halak was not always on the best of teams, and Varlamov, I mean, he played well, but they didn't make the playoffs one year, and they weren't always the best team either. So, anyways, so in reality, our save percentage would probably be better than that, but it's probably close enough. Now, what I think we can do is let's compare the stats we do have to what a normal season would have, at least for the ones we have. Let's do team stats. We want let's do 2013-14. The team with the most goals for was from 2013-14 to 2022-23 is Florida with 334 goals. Based on what the work that I've already done, and so adjusting their expected scoring, we got 339.5 goals. So in theory, it should be the highest scoring team of the past more or less 10 years. In theory. Now, goaltending, I mean, it's kind of really hard to compare. And then likewise, the differential's hard to compare. Now, the other thing we can maybe do, is there a way to estimate team differential? On ice goal differential. That is there a goals against, expected goals against, or something like that? Shots, shooting percentage, shot attempts, low danger, goals percentage, for adjusted expected goals, for goals on ice, goal differential. Let's see something here. Now what I'm wondering is if this total matches the actual total. Let's just see. Where is Anaheim? Let's try 15.7 plus 15 plus 12.3 plus 8.1 plus 6.2 plus 2.8 plus 1.3 plus 1.1 plus minus 2.3 minus 4.5 minus 6.3 minus 7.2 minus 8.5 minus 8.9 minus 9.6 minus 9.8 minus 10.8 minus 11.5 minus 20.9 minus 24.7 minus 26.4 equals negative 89. There's Anaheim. No, so it doesn't equal. I mean, I don't really know how to figure it out. Like, I mean, to anticipate goals against is, I don't know. There's no consistency with shot against, is there? 28 to 35. .4 to 3.8. Well, let's try this maybe. So what's the greatest shots against per game? 35.5 times 82 times so our goaltenders had a save percentage of 912. One minus, oops. So if we make ourselves the highest shot against team in the league, you could forecast goals against of 256. And where would that put us? 256 puts us 13th in the league for goals against, like worst goals against. So essentially on probably a worst case scenario, maybe. It's hard to say here, but maybe worst case scenario 256 goals against in the season. 339 339.5, which gives us a differential of 83. I mean, without going into anything, more in depth than this, which I don't even know if it's possible because I just don't know how to do it really. It's an approximation maybe of maybe our worst case scenario. So if you take your goaltending save percentage, multiply it by a worst case scenario shots against, then you get, in theory, a worst case scenario goals against. Subtract that from your expected goals for or estimated goals for, then you get your differential. I mean, we should be, I think that would be the best team by a lot, wouldn't it? Let's see. So just for interest's sake, I want to see what the best differential is. We want to organize by diff. Descending. So 83 goal differential would rank us at the sixth best team in the past 10 years. So, I mean, again, I don't know if there's any ways to better estimate the differential, and more specifically, to get that differential, the goals against. I think this is as good, like I said, as good as I can think of. And based on that, it's the sixth best team in the past 10 years, basically. So, in all indications, it is, well, the best team in the league. The only teams better would have been Florida from last year, Calgary from last year, We said 83. Washington from 2016-17. Boston from 2013-14. Tampa 2018-19. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't most of these teams win the Stanley Cup? Just out of interest, let's have a look. Where is it? So we're better than the Colorado Avalanche that won the Cup last year. We're better than the Tampa team that won the Stanley Cup the year before. Better than the Tampa team that won the Cup before. This is regular season stats. Better than the St. Louis team that won the year before. Again, remember, we're missing. It's not quite fair because those teams had shortened seasons. Maybe what's more accurate is like Washington 2017-18 were better than them. Pittsburgh 2017 better. Pittsburgh 2016 better, and so on. So, I mean, like I said, it's the sixth best team according to this of all teams in the past 10 years. Would it actually be? It's hard to say. I don't know. So, like I said, I mean, I think this is the best predictions I can give for estimations. I don't think we can really do more than that. Give me one more sec here. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best we can do for estimates of production. So last thing I'll do here is just recap the series, and bear with me a moment. So keep in mind there's 33 of these, so I'll try to do it all relatively quickly here. So actually I should share this, I might as well. One sec. We don't need that anymore. Don't need that. Keep that. Don't need that. Okay, so first we started with defining the problem. So I figured out our parameters, the restrictions I was going to impose, things like that. Then we figured out how deep we need the roster. So as we saw yesterday, we need, what was it? 4 extra defensemen, 7 extra forwards, and you'd be going 3 to 4 goalies deep in the span of a season. And so that's important, and a big part of the reason why we decided to go with 3 goalies is to really make sure that we stabilize our goaltending. But we'll come back to that. I'll talk about that once we get to that stream. Our age and salary correlated? Not really, if I recall correctly. Our age and points correlated? Not really, if I remember correctly. We determined player performance targets for goalies and different levels of players. So we created tiers, which essentially represented each level of player on a roster. So the best player, second best, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and all that, all the way through to 12 for. Well, I think it went as far as 16 forwards and what was it, 9 defensemen or something like that. So to give us an estimation of what we should be aiming at for players at each of those levels. We took a look at contract timing and duration. We discovered that the optimal length is probably somewhere around 3 years for a contract, which is why we use that as our target for all the players we selected. Actually, I'll talk about the rest of that in a sec. There wasn't really much of a relationship with performance and age, so you can't really plan to do your contracts based on the player's age, like a longer contract when they're younger and a shorter one when they're older. Really, it doesn't matter because player performance consistency is very inconsistent. So in reality, players move up and down those tiers that I created. And so they could be the best player one year, the third best the next year. And so the closest that you can really get to any consistency is a stretch of 3 years, is what we determined in the series. We determined average contracts for each tier of player. We use those as kind of a baseline in selecting our players and putting together our roster. What else did we have here? We considered cost per goal. It essentially resulted in the same approximate salary as average, gave us kind of a range to consider for each player tier. So we knew a number one defenseman should probably be within X and X salary. And we also knew what performance would be expected of a top defenseman and so on. Performance to make the playoffs. What did we discover there? I can't recall. Was it? I think it was minimum goals for or something like that, and we well exceeded it. Differential, we should conceivably have exceeded it. So really, in the end, I mean, it's not of all that importance to us because I think we've surpassed any expectations. Salary distribution, same sort of thing. We kind of considered average salaries and compared to what we could spend and things like that to give us an idea of how much we should spend on all players. So we had a whole bunch of different targets to consider when we were selecting our players and how much they should be getting paid. Which in the end, funny enough, we saw how, so it was time consuming to select the players, but it was not, all things considered, not that difficult to put together the roster, and I didn't need to adjust it, and the production was great. The players are great. There's cap space. Like, I mean, in the end, all the prep work I did, all these 33 streams in the end, they all really work together to be able to make it as easy, or all things considered, as easy as it was to actually put together the roster. So the distribution of scoring from forwards and defense we found didn't correlate with winning. So it doesn't matter if your scoring is coming from your forwards or defense. It's all about differential. You need to score more goals than you have scored against, which is obvious, but also we found that goals for by itself and goals against by itself had the same correlation with winning percentage. So in the end, differential was the driver. So it's not about minimizing goals against, it's not about maximizing goals for, it's about the combination of the two, making sure your differential is maximized, which was part of the strategy here. So then we considered about the 3 goalies thing. So that's where, like I was saying, teams on average use 3 to 4 goalies a season, if I recall correctly. And the production you get out of your so you have 20 active roster, 20 players that dress on any given night, 23 active roster players. So those 3 extra depth players, why are you using your depth players on the players that are dramatically less impactful? So for example, why would you have a forward that produces like I don't know what it was, but it was something like 10, 15 points in a season, when you could have a goalie that can play up to, goalies we selected could play up to something like 40 games at least. At a minimum, they could play like 40 games. Some of these guys could play up to like 60, 70 games. Why waste a roster spot on a player that's going to be way less impactful than a good goalie? So that's why we decided 3 goalies is a good strategy for an active roster, and it's crazy not to do it, given how much you need to rely on your goalies. So we forecasted cap increases, which isn't going to impact us because we never selected players that extend further than 2 years into the future. And then in theory, we're going to negotiate those contracts to be within the cap, given their position on the roster, their tier that I established. If they don't want to take that salary, then we trade them. And that's the whole strategy for managing the roster and cap spending. So term and expiration flow. So we want to, on average, have, I think it was 7 players with expiring contracts at each year. And so what I described it as laddered. You could describe it as on a step-by-step basis, where you have one person expire, then another the next year, then another the next year. And if you do that every 3 players, you turn out getting 7 players in total every year with expiring contracts. So that's what the goal would be, given that we want contracts of 3 years or less, or ballpark 3 years. Then we selected all our players. I talked about the importance of depth players and how you want to have not two-way contracts, but entry-level contracts as your players that go up and down between the NHL and AHL, so that you don't lose players to waiver claims. Uh, and yeah, so that basically you just you have all your um, prospects developing in the top two lines in your AHL roster, and then as soon as you have an injury, they're that player leaps up into their appropriate spot depending on their comparative performance. And otherwise, if your roster has no prospects that can go up and down, then you can use those two-way contracts. Or, as for example, let's say your third and fourth line in the AHL, where you have serviceable players that could, in theory, play in the NHL, then a worst case scenario, you have to rely on those if you're like decimated from injuries, but that seems unlikely if you play in well. So, um, anyways, so depth players are important, but and especially you want to try to maximize your use of those entry level contracts. And then we had the full roster, which we would have known, I think, on the 31st part, which was this roster here. Actually, I should keep it over to this side. As I went over at the beginning of the stream, you can just double check the roster here. We're under the cap. Our performance, again, to summarize, our performance should be approximately, I mean, just with a rudimentary estimation, should be maybe the sixth best team in the past 10 years, regular season wise at least. If you make worst case scenario on shots against and use our average save percentage, we should have a differential, putting us at the sixth best team. Oh, and I should say, I think for goals for, we were the best from the estimation of the past 10 years. So, I mean, just across the board, in theory, it should be the best team in the league if it existed, and could be, well, one of the top 10 teams in the past 10 years. And I would argue probably in the playoffs, because of all the expected goal differential of each player is positive, and the wins above replacement is positive for all of them. I mean, again, it's a rudimentary kind of way to consider the players, but I mean, we're not doing this for money. So good enough's good enough, and that's good enough. And it seems like it probably would be accurate. If you look at the roster, I think it makes sense. And also, the last point I want to make, and this is something I spoke about with somebody else yesterday, this roster is not that unrealistic to have. So Larkin's on an expiring contract. He might not be kept by Detroit. DeBrincat, there was like somewhat soft talk of him getting moved. I mean, Aho's kind of a untouchable. Pedersen's probably an untouchable. Outside of that, the rest of these players are all kind of like Varlamov's probably at least potentially going to be traded before the deadline. Halak's a backup. Reimer could be traded easily. All these players are all, for the most part, very realistic for any team to pick up. The only, like I said, the only real untouchables is maybe Aho and Pedersen, and to have only two of all the players that I chose that are untouchables. I mean, well, maybe Reinhardt, but maybe. So, I mean, it's not that unrealistic of a team to be put together. And I think any GM could really do it. And so as a result, why wouldn't they? Uh, I'd love to try it out if I could, but of course I'm not in control of a roster, so I can't say if I could do it in the real world. Would it actually work? Would the team actually be good? I don't know. I'd need people to rely on to help me consider all the analytics and all that, but in concepts, it should be perfectly realistic, perfectly possible for any GM to be able to put together a roster like this. And this is even a worst case scenario because remember, we have no entry level contract players on our team, which, if you do any amount of drafting and developing, your team's going to have some of those players on your team, like on the roster, the active roster. Add that in, you can spend even more on all these players if you wanted to. Maybe the team could be even better. Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I never chose the top players to put together the roster. There's no Dreisaitl's on this team, McDavid's, McKinnon. There's no Makar. There's no. Just go down the list of all the top players in the league. I really, really limited the number of top players that I chose. I didn't cheat with any players that are underpaid like Tage Thompson. This is really, really not unrealistic. I mean, maybe there's... Because, yeah, I can just pick and choose my players. Maybe that's unfair, but with all the limitations I imposed on myself, this team is, I would argue, perfectly realistic, and it should be the best team. So why can't it happen? Why shouldn't somebody try, or at least use any number of the concepts I came up with during this series? So that's my opinion on it, and I'm sticking to it. So just so you know, this team is now published on CapFriendly. You can have a look at it and reference it if you'd like. One last thing I should show you just before I close things up here. We do, just for reference, want to look at the expiration of the contract. So this is just what I was saying. 2 years or less remaining on the contract for all the players. So all of it meets my criteria. So just also wanted to show you this. And we go one depth player for each group of players. So one depth player for forwards, one for defense, one for goalies, which I think is fair. I think that summarizes the series. I think I did a really good job. Again, this is kind of rudimentary. It's the best you can, or the best I could do with my knowledge and the data that's publicly available. If you go through all the streams, it'll explain how I came about to each piece of strategy, each piece of data that directed that strategy. Everything's explained. I didn't miss any subjects that I can see at this point. And the biggest thing that you people have to remember, nobody's really criticized this series, and I've had nothing but upvotes, likes on my streams. But if anybody was to criticize this, remember, I do this all on the spot, no preparation except for the subject. None of this math, it's all done on the spot. All the gathering of data is done on the spot. strategizing how I put together and calculate the data all on the spot. Everything I do is on the spot. I might have 3 to 5 bullet points of things that I want to consider. That's it. So considering that too, I think I did really well. And even if I had done all my prep work, all the work behind the scenes, I still think it's great because I can't find any holes, or glaring holes at least, in my work, or missing a subject to consider. Again, it's rudimentary. It's not, a perfect scientific analysis and strategy, but it's as good as it's going to be. Like I said, with the data that I have, the information I have access to, and so on. So I'm happy with it. I hope everybody else will be too. I hope there's some discussion that eventually comes from it. The good thing is now is in future streams, if I have an argument, I just reference back to all these. I have all my reference materials for my arguments, which when I say that, for example, Boston should trade McAvoy for maybe some more productive forwards, I have full justification given the strategy that I've explained here, and then I can reference back even to specific streams that explain it. So like I said, I'm very happy with the whole series. I think it's good work, all things considered, and I hope you guys did too. And on that note, if you like the stream, hit the like button, share with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications. Otherwise, channel homepage has upcoming streams, should be 2 p.m. Eastern daily except for Sundays. Tomorrow I haven't decided on the subject because I was thinking about this stuff still, and then I got to figure out what to do. One teaser I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to do a live stream for trade deadline day. That's for sure, but otherwise the rest of the subjects, not certain of them. I have a few ideas that I think are going to be interesting, but we'll see. Otherwise, any comments, leave them in the comments. Suggestions, same thing. And we will see you guys tomorrow. And thanks for all the people that have tuned into this series. As you can see, it has been a lot of work. 33 streams worth, and I don't know how many hours. But you would have seen all the work on the streams. So anyways, on that note, thanks again, and we will see you guys tomorrow with whatever subject I come up with.